Moses told the people to take and slaughter the lamb and put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost outside the house. This would be like the front door. So they would put blood here, here, and here. Now, when they did that, they were to roast the lamb. They were to make unleavened bread, which means that it didn't have anything in it to make it rise and make it fluffy. It was flat. And they were to eat bitter herbs. The bitter herbs were to remind them that they'd been in slavery. And the unleavened bread was to remind them that they were leaving quickly. Because when this was over, Moses was going to come and tell them, it's time for us to go to the promised land. So they were supposed to eat this with their clothes on, with their coat on, with their shoes on, ready to go. So they relied on that. God told them to rely on that blood that was on the door to alert the angel, the avenging angel who was going to come and avenge them of the way that they've been treated as slaves, and they were going to kill some of the Egyptians. And the blood being on the door would mean that the angel would pass over them and would not stop at their house. So that was their salvation. So their salvation was in the blood on the door.
Actually, here's the one thing. The Passover...
Well, I don't want to go into a lot of details because we could talk all day about the Passover.
Well, the Passover was when angels would kill the...
Firstborn, yeah. Well, I don't go into that, okay? That's not my point. You're missing the point. Now, when Jesus, the night before he was crucified, he told his disciples that he was going to die and that he was going to be crucified. And they were at a special meal. I know it's a cross. Thank you. He was going to be crucified and he was going to die. Now, they didn't pay much attention to him. But when he was crucified, his hands were nailed here and here. So there was blood there, and then his feet here. So it was a triangle that was upside down with this one. But it was still the same thing. Now, God had already said that Jesus was going to become the Passover, and he was called the Lamb of God. Yes, I see the money. Thank you. But anyway, the night before, he had a special meal with them, and it was Passover time. It was the time that they were asked to, the Israelites were asked to commemorate, to remember what had happened to them when they were in slavery in Egypt. And so they were having a special meal. And during this special meal, Jesus did something different. At the end, he had bread and he had the wine. And he took the bread and he broke it. And he said to them, "This is my body, which is broken for you," which was symbolic of what was going to happen to him on the cross. And he said, this wine is my blood that is shed for you. So Jesus became our Passover lamb, and we no longer have to sacrifice animals. In fact, God would be very angry if you killed an animal and sacrificed it to him. Because Jesus was the ultimate perfect sacrifice for us. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be partaking of what is called communion, and we're going to have the bread and the juice to remember that Jesus is our sacrifice today. Now, in the old times, they relied on the blood of the Lamb. What do we rely on today? We rely on the blood of Jesus Christ because he died for our sins. And so that's what we're commemorating today. We're remembering that Jesus died for our sins. Okay, let's have a prayer. Did you want to say it for us today?
Sure.
Okay, when you say it, I want you to remember to thank us for, thank God for sending his son Jesus, as well as the rest of the things that you say. All right?
Let us bow our heads. Lord, God our Father, please let us be a salt and light and love others as Jesus loves us. And let us thank you for sending your son Jesus down on earth to rid us of sin. Please make sure to put your healing hands on everybody who needs them. And please let everybody have a happy life. Please make sure that as we bread and juice, which represents Jesus' body and his blood, we would be great and have happiness for eternity. In your Son's name, amen.
He always says good prayer.
Are you kidding, Brett? Or Brett now? I just want to hear. Big one, Dad. Let's go. My spot. We'll get back right on my feet.
I don't know that I'll need the school this morning, but I'm going to get it up here just in case. This is always a good time for me. I was here, I think, in August of last year, and as I sat there in the beginning of the service, I thought, you know, it's been about 26 years ago, in April, I think it will be, that I first became your pastor. It was in December 26 years ago that Gene McMahon called me into coming up here telling me that he had papers to grade and all of that, and that he just couldn't make it. And I've always said that rascal had something in mind. But it is good to be with you. It's always good to catch up. Is this too loud? That makes it better. Fill you in. Everybody's wanting to know what's going on. Well, you know, Renee and Jason have moved to the States from New Zealand. Owen is a freshman at Bethel. He's going to school on a Renaissance scholarship. So if you get an opportunity to hear the Renaissance, Owen will be. Right now he's doing all of the sound for them, mixing all the sound. And, eventually he hopes to become the lead guitarist for the Renaissance group. Tristan in France completed culinary school, and he is now a assistant to a chef there in Nancy at one of the nice restaurants. Actually, right down on the big square in Nancy. So, Lucy's in the 7th grade now, and CJ's in the 6th. And, everything is flowing along. I've always told some of you, I wonder how Mary Ann is. She's as feisty as ever, and that's good news. And no, I have not retired. I've looked at her honey-do list. I have no interest in it at all. Besides that, she doesn't pay very well. So at any rate, I'm glad to be here. It's good to see you. If you would turn in your Bibles this morning to our scripture lesson, it's found in James chapter 3. We're going to be looking at verse 2, and then at verses 8, 9, and 10. James writes, "For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man, able to bridle the whole body as well." And then over in verse 8 he says, "But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil and full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men, men who have been made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come both blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be this way." Let us pray. Our Father, once again, we thank you for the privilege that we have of coming here together to worship and sing for your praises and to fellowship together. And I thank you for this congregation and for their faithfulness, Father, and I pray that you would bless each and every one that is here, bless each family member of this congregation, and we lift them up to you, Father, and we ask that you would bless them in the name of Jesus. Be with us as we study your word this morning, and help us that we may open our hearts and our minds. For it's in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. Amen. I was fortunate enough to have an aunt, a great aunt she was. Her name was Cecil Baker. And she was pretty much my grandmother, the only grandmother that I ever knew. Aunt Cecil came from the old school. There was no easy way to do anything. It all had to be done the hard way. And she had an aunt, who I guess you would say was my great aunt as well, that just wasn't really a very good person. She treated my Aunt Cecil like dirt. She treated all the family like they were lower than she was. She had nothing good to say about them. She was always lifting herself up. She was conniving. She was manipulative, and there wasn't a lot that I could really say that I really appreciated about my Aunt Grace. And I never really was able to understand Grace. I'm afraid that many of us today don't understand grace. We don't understand the full concept of grace. The concept of grace is really thrilling when you think about it. The best known definition of grace is a three-word definition. It's God's unmerited favor. In other words, it is freely given. It is totally undeserved. And so we are receiving through grace the exact opposite of what we really deserve. God gave Moses the law of Israel. And we know about the law of Moses. We know about the Ten Commandments. And if you have ever really studied the Old Testament, you also find that the law was just absolutely immense. It would run a cook crazy. Because you could only cook certain things in certain vessels and other things in those vessels, and you didn't ever mix the two, and it was impossible to keep the law. It was a complete system, and it was merit-based. We're under another system today. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus made it very clear. He affirmed the law. But today we are not under the law, but we are under grace and truth. We're not under the law of Moses. We are under what theologians call the dispensation, or the period of grace. And the more we understand grace, the more we can celebrate it. John says the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Amen. The system of the law was based on merit and work. What you do determines what you receive. And it's easy for us to get involved in that kind of feeling because our whole society is based on merit. We're always told, you work hard, you keep your nose clean, you'll get ahead. You do this and you do this and this is going to happen. You save your money, you'll be able to retire someday. Maybe I will be able to retire someday. But all of this is based on merit. We do performance appraisals on all of our employees every year, and it was all merit-based. It's based on what they have done throughout the year that is good. And they are rewarded according to that goodness. So we have a real problem distinguishing between the law and grace. Mm-hmm. And I was talking with Dr. Carloff the other day. He and I are good friends. And we were talking about one of the biggest issues in the church was the problem in the mystery of grace. We know we're under grace, but we forget that we're under grace. And then we act as though we're not under grace, but under the law. Under grace, what you believe is what determines your faith. Not what you've done, not what you have done, but it's what you believe. Jesus loved mankind so much that he sacrificially and selflessly and unconditionally loved us. about unconditional love. I like that term, unconditional love. Because what that means is God loves me warts and all. Now that's getting kind of down and dirty, but that's the way it is. He loves me in spite of myself. And as a result of that, because of my faith, because of my belief, He has brought grace to me. That's why people under the law, the scribes and the Pharisees, had such a problem with Jesus. They couldn't understand why Jesus was doing what He was doing. But He was demonstrating grace and truth. We spent a long time looking at the Gospel of Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount, and all through that time, what did Jesus display? He displayed grace and truth. And He taught us there how we are to relate to God and how we are to relate to our fellow man. But it created so much conflict within the Jewish community, among the Jewish leaders, that they wanted to attract Him. They wanted to find some way to discredit Jesus. And so, you will recall the little story over in Matthew about the woman that was brought to Jesus in adultery. And according to the law, she was to be stoned. Stoned to death. But Jesus did not dispute the charges that was brought against her. Which means He knew she was guilty. And as they brought her to Jesus, that was the law that brought her to Jesus. Because the Pharisees said, well, according to the law, she has to be stoned to death. So they bring her to Jesus. They're trying to take us responsibility for stability in society, I think, and society doesn't have a lot of stability in it, I've learned over the years. But because Jesus was consistently challenging the scribes and the Pharisees and those under the law, they had to do something to head this whole thing off. So they bring this Jewish woman to Jesus. She's been found guilty of adultery. And they know that they got Jesus trapped, because if He sets her free, then He has gone against the Roman law. Okay? Or if He has her condemned, He goes against the Roman law. Because the Romans had told the Jews, you can't execute anybody anymore. So if He said, yes, you go ahead and stone her, he's violated Roman law. If He lets her go, then He's violated the law of Moses. So they think they got Jesus trapped. You all familiar with the story? The law says she should be stoned. What do you say, Jesus? We're told that Jesus stooped down and He scratched around in the dirt with his finger. I don't know how He wrote it. Maybe He was thinking about the woman. Nothing's really known of her. We don't know anything about her status. We don't know about her family background. We don't know anything about it, but I think we can surmise that she was very frightened. She was confused. She was hopeless. She disgraced herself and her family. And now, according to the law of Moses, she was to be killed. This woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, the law of Moses commands that she be stoned. What do you say, Jesus? Have you ever thought about who this woman really is? We don't know if she came from the south side of the tracks. We don't know if she came from a wealthy family. We don't know where she came from. We don't know if she was rich or poor. We don't know if she was black or white or red or yellow. We don't know any of that stuff. We know she was from the Middle East. But do you know who that woman really was? Me and you. She was every one of us. She was every one of us. She represents us all. We have all been caught in our sins, right?
Amen.
James says if we break one law, we've broken them all. So, that places us all on the same moral level, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When we see this truth, we can humbly eliminate self-righteousness from our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We're all made of clay. We all have the inclination to sin. But with one devastating statement, Jesus demonstrated that the law wasn't wrong. But if everyone saw the law for what it was, we would understand that we're all guilty, including the self-proclaimed puritanical, righteous, moral guardians and scribes and the Pharisees, and all of those that would follow in their footsteps. So they challenged him to find a solution. What was to be done with this woman? Guilty of adultery, capital crime. Jesus didn't question her guilt. He didn't condone it. But he stood up after he scratched around in the dirt and he said, okay. Let him that is without sin cast the first stone. The tradition was that the person who caught them in adultery was to be the one to throw the first stone. And then other members of the community would throw stones so that nobody could really be blamed for the woman's death. When people's hypocrisy is exposed, the first thing they want to do is get rid of the person doing the exposing. The self-righteous man exposed this adulterous woman. And Jesus, in his mercy, exposed the hypocrisy of the leaders of the church. It's hypocritical for us as sinners to want to harm other sinners because of their sin. It's hypocritical. According to Jesus, the only person that can do the judging is the one that is purely righteous. Which is why Paul, over in Romans the 8th chapter, and you remember this, when we come before the court, Jesus will be our defense attorney, and what is he going to say? They're not guilty, Father. That's grace. By all rights, when we come before God, we should all be condemned. But Jesus says that's not the way it is. We're talking now about grace. In the mind of God, righteousness and justice are all tied up in grace. And when grace is removed, then we're left with heartless hypocrisy. Jesus didn't overturn the law. Instead, he established the righteousness on the basis of grace. The woman was undoubtedly guilty. According to the law, she should have been stoned. But this can't be done because the Romans wouldn't allow it. So, Jesus says, if anyone is without sin, let him cast the first stone. And one by one, they walked away. Which left an interesting scenario, because now we have Jesus standing here with the woman. And he says, honey, where are your accusers? here to condemn you? And she said, no one, sir. And listen to what Jesus says. He says, I don't condemn you either. Go your way. And don't sin anymore. Jesus doesn't condone what she's done. He doesn't dismiss the sin as being unimportant. He knows and she knows that what she's done is wrong. But Jesus condemns the sin, not the sinner.
Amen.
And that's important. The woman is called to change. But the message to change is directed to all of us as well. When we think about the amazing grace of Jesus, actually he led this woman through grace from disgrace to grace. Because look at what he's done for her. First thing he did, he gave her protection from the crowd. And then Jesus said, neither do I condemn you. He gave her back her dignity. He gave her back her self-esteem. He was showing her that you are no worse than the rest of this bunch. He let her know that she wasn't the only sinner in town. So he gave her protection, he gave her forgiveness, he gave her dignity, he gave her self-esteem, and he released her from condemnation. Grace doesn't punish us for sinning. Sin punishes us. But grace sets us free. The wages of sin is death. Jesus said, go and sin no more. You know why he told her that? He was encouraging her to change her life because he knows that next week we're all going to be back in the same place. Right? That's our nature. But by grace, we're okay. We're free. When we understand grace, we walk in freedom. We're free from guilt. We're free from condemnation. And we don't live being stoned by condemnation. But we live free from God's grace. And as a result, we can sing Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. Savior, it's one. Once was lost, but now we're found. Was blind, and now see. Let us pray. Father, we are thankful for the grace that you have bestowed upon us. We are so thankful, Father, that through grace and through the shed blood of Christ and for the grace that you provided through him, that we will not receive what we deserve. Help us, Father, to understand the freedom that grace gives us, and help us to understand that we are no longer under condemnation, but at the same time, we should not be condemning others. But we should be loving them and teaching them and helping them to maintain their self-esteem, understanding that by grace, you have been set free. We pray for them in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.